He made a commitment around the key taxes that working people pay: income tax, national insurance, and VAT. But you'll know from your own experience, Lord Lamont, that if you start saying no to other taxes, then as soon as you don't say no, people will assume that's the one you're going to increase. And so it is right, and this is, with respect, what you would have done and did do in my position, is that you rightly said that taxes are matters for a budget, and we'll set out our policy there.
Well, I'm sorry I can't get you to be more forthcoming. May I therefore switch the subject slightly to the subject of Lord Agnew and Lord Vergey's questions. That is the Mansion House speech and the remarks that you made about the need for greater risk-taking by investors, which I think is sensible and wholly welcome what you said. But risk-taking is not real risk-taking if it involves compulsion. And it isn't really changing the culture if what you propose involves compulsion. And therefore, the one reservation I have about what you said was the power to mandate pension funds to invest in certain assets. I understand you're only taking that in the pensions bill as a residual power, but why should you have it at all? Because that is not really going to achieve your objective of changing the culture. And could I put it to you, it's also at odds with the responsibilities of trustees of pension funds, and it also carries the risk that this power might be used to direct investments into particularly politically favourable projects. I'm not suggesting you would do that, but it is a risk. And if you really want to change the culture, you don't want compulsion at all.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that question, which I will answer a bit more freely than the last one. You'll be pleased to know. So I think there's sort of two parts to this, Lord Lamont. There's the pension side, and then there's also the retail investment. So I'll take each of those in turn. I want people to know that we are serious about pensions reform, and that's for two reasons. First of all, people have been badly served by too many pension products in the UK, that they're not getting the returns on their savings that they would do in other jurisdictions around the world, because we have got too fragmented a pension system, too many small funds that don't have the economies of scale, do not have the expertise to make the best investments on behalf of their savers. And the reason that is so bad is that when people save for retirement, they are sacrificing consumption today, and especially at a time when the cost of living challenges are as acute as they have been in the last few years, for that money not to be working as hard for a saver as it could be, I think is really letting people down. And so that's why we are, through the pensions bill, requiring the consolidation. And that's not, we would like you to consolidate. The pensions regulator will have powers to consolidate. I think that's the right thing to do, because the current system is failing too many people. And the lessons from Australia, from the Netherlands and from Canada is that a smaller number of bigger schemes deliver better returns for pension savers. And so both within the local government pension scheme, where at the moment we've got 96 different administering authorities, and we're going to take that down to 8 pools, but we're not going to say you can put your money in the pool if you want to. The money will go into 8 pools. We're not having 96 different authorities managing different schemes. We're going to consolidate local government pensions because we want them to work better for savers and work better for taxpayers as well. And we're going to consolidate the DC landscape as well. We built on what the previous government did, what Jeremy Hunt did when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, with the Mansion House Agreement, with a new Mansion House Accord. And this is in the spirit of what he did, but it takes it to the next step. And that is that now 10% of assets in main funds will be invested in private assets. And I think around 90% of the biggest pension funds have signed up to this. But, and this is a sort of crucial difference, of that minimum 10%, at least half has got to be in UK private assets. And this is because we know that there are massive opportunities with infrastructure and also with private assets for growth opportunities, and we want British savers to be able to benefit from those opportunities here and abroad, but we want them to benefit from those opportunities here as well. We haven't mandated that, that's just happened. But mandation is there if things don't move in the way we expect it to. But there's no reason to use mandation because voluntarily the pension schemes are signing up to that. But that reserve power exists if we ever need to use it. The final thing that the pensions bill does is make it easier to achieve surplus extraction for some of the DB pension schemes that over the last decade or so have built up large surpluses in those pension funds to be able to extract those both for investment but also to return that money to pension scheme members. So that's what we're doing on the pensions side, and the aim is to better support savers and better to support the real economy. On retail investing, we are changing, and we will do ahead of the new ISA year starting in April next year, changing the rules around advice and guidance because post-financial crisis it is almost impossible for somebody on a modest or a middle income to get advice on how to invest their money. And so we're going to make changes there. This work is being led by Chris Cummings at the Investment Association to make it easier for providers of financial services to give a nudge to customers to say, well, you know, you've got £20,000 in cash earning 4% a year, 3.5% a year, but actually, if you look at what's happening in stock markets, they go up by usually nominal GDP, higher than inflation, higher than the base rate. If you put money in there, if you're in your 20s or 30s, by the time you retire, by the time you're ready to buy a house, it's likely to have made a better return than just leaving your money in cash. And at the moment, you're not allowed to do that as a financial services provider. You're not even allowed to nudge somebody towards a product that might be more suitable for them. And so that advice and guidance review and the change we're going to bring in is about encouraging people to diversify and to invest their money in a way that's probably going to be better for them. Yes, it involves taking a bit more of a risk, but an informed risk based on your circumstances for many people is probably better than the status quo at the moment. We are also looking at the ISA framework. We announced the long-term assets fund, is that what it's called? Will be merged into the main ISA so that people can take advantage of those innovative products. But we didn't announce any wider changes, as you know, to ISAs. The big change we've made on retail investing is around the guidance that customers can get to, I hope, encourage that culture of investment and allowing ordinary British savers to benefit from fast-growing British businesses and new opportunities.
Just to say to colleagues in advance, we do have a hard 3:30 finish, so with apologies, we'll have to be brief in our questions in the follow-up. Lord Davis.
Okay, follow-up. Good afternoon, Chancellor. I don't want to preempt Baroness Casey's review of adult social care, but do you accept that she's due to produce a solution to an oncoming crisis? And are we building into our plans for the future as I say, I don't want to preempt what conclusion it's going to reach, but my guess is it's going to involve a lot more money. And so where is that money going to come from?
Yeah, fine. Thanks very much, Lord Davis. Baroness Casey's Phase 1 report will be published in 2026. That will look at how we can use existing resources better. A huge amount of money goes into social care, both privately funded and publicly funded. And I expect, like most public services, that money could be better used than it is at the moment. So phase one is about quick wins, how to use the existing money in a better way. And phase two in 2028 will be around the future arrangements, including around financing. In the meantime, we've set out that we're going to bring in a fair pay agreement for social care. We'll be saying more about that in the months ahead. The local government settlements that we made both in the first phase of the spending review in the budget last year and also in the spending review, the multi-year spending review last month, gave settlements for local government real terms increases in their spending, the first sort of sustained real terms increases for a number of years, as well as additional investment in the NHS of £29 billion a year. So, I think there is a wide consensus that the social care system needs reforming. We are making changes ahead of the Casey review, particularly around local government funding and fair pay agreements, but recognise that much more systematic work needs to take place, which is why we've published the person who can deal with intractable problems, Baroness Casey, to do the review.
Thank you.
Lord Razzle.
Yes, I'd like to turn to the slightly thorny issue of the introduction of the rise in employers' national insurance contributions, which, as you know, has subsequently proved a bit controversial. I'm interested in what you think about the impact on employment, inflation. Obviously, the bigger companies are better organised to absorb this, although I think if you went into your local pub, if you had the time to, you'd find that the local pub, if it was still there, was complaining to you about the impact on it. Did the Treasury model the affected changes before you introduced that? And if so, what was the predicted effect?
Thank you very much for your question, Lord Razzle. So when we came to office last year, and sort of links to the question earlier on from Lord Turnbull, we did face a situation where there were a number of unfunded spending commitments, and we needed to explain how we were going to pay for them. There were choices about how to address that. We could have increased taxes on working people. We could have cut public spending. I didn't think that they were the right choices, and so as a result, we did increase taxes on business and on the wealthiest in society by around £40 billion in the budget last year, and around just under 25 billion of that came from an increase in employer national insurance contributions. Now, recognising, as you say, that smaller businesses would struggle more with that, we increased the employment allowance to £10,500. So if you're employing the equivalent of 4 people on the national living wage, you wouldn't be paying any national insurance contributions at all. That was a doubling of the employment allowance. It means around 1 million businesses are paying either less or no more national insurance than what they were previously. But of course, on bigger businesses, especially employment-heavy businesses, do face or have faced an increase in that burden. But the counterfactual would have been either higher taxes on working people who have already had to absorb the vast amount of the cost of living challenges. It would have meant cuts in public services that had already been starved of resources for many years under the austerity of the previous government, or it would have meant more borrowing, which I just don't think would be the right approach, and would have meant that the Bank of England weren't able to cut interest rates by 4 times in the last year. And of course those lower interest rates benefit both households, especially with mortgages or other lending, and also help businesses who have also paid a heavy price for the sharp increase in interest rates that we've seen over the last few years. So that money that we raised, including the national insurance contributions, we used to put our public finances on a firm footing, and also enabled us to put that additional money, £29 billion extra a year, into the National Health Service. So they were the right decisions in the circumstances that we faced, and I continue to defend those. The modelling by the Office of Budget Responsibility, I think, should be the place to go to look for the impact of policies. But you can't, in my view, look at individual policies on their own. You have to look at what the alternatives were, and I think the alternatives would have been an awful lot worse.
Yes, well, I don't want to get into a debate about that. I don't necessarily agree with you. So what you're saying is the Treasury didn't model the effect of this, particularly in the hospitality sector, but the OBR may well.
Well, you've read the OBR report, but I'll let Beth say a few words.
In the normal way, we work very closely with the OBR on their, ultimately what are their assumptions on the impact on employment, and we fed into that closely. We also did, as we do for all of our budget measures, sort of sectoral analysis and that kind of thing, but as the Chancellor said, a lot of that is also looking not at individual measures, but looking at the cumulative impact of those across the piece.
Yeah, I'd just also say this. I've set out my policies and what this government are doing. And of course people can disagree, but then the onus on them is to say, well, what would you do? Because if you're facing a situation where you've got a lot of unfunded spending commitments, you could say, okay, fine, well, we won't do that spending. That's definitely a reasonable thing to say, and then you wouldn't have to increase the taxes. Or you could say, well, I want to pay for those public services that have been promised, in which case you can either borrow to fund that, and therefore you wouldn't have benefited, I don't believe, from the cuts in interest rates, and you would have paid higher costs of government borrowing. Or you could say, well, tax someone else. Well, that's fine, but you have to say who. But you can't support the increase in public spending unless you support the money to pay for it. And if you don't support the increase in public spending, that's fine, but you have to justify why you would not be putting in the additional £29 billion into the health service.
We would have increased the bank levy, increased the tax on the technology companies, and taxed the gambling companies. So you could have got close to 40 million in that, but now it's not the time to debate.
We could discuss that another time, but it is maths like that got us into the problems that we're in today.
Baroness Wolf.
Good afternoon, Chancellor. I'd like to go back to one of the things that you raised when talking about your reforms, namely planning and infrastructure. And I think everybody in this room is well aware of the history of the Back Tunnel, 359,000 pages of planning documentation before you get anywhere on the Lower Thames crossing and so on. And you particularly said that you would like the Lords to get the planning and infrastructure bill through fast. In that context, I think there has been some surprise expressed about the fact that the bill has come to the Lords with some government amendments that actually seem to make it easier than in the original drafting to block and delay things on environmental impact grounds. And I wondered if you could say a little about that, because it seems like a good moment to ask you to do so. But also much more generally, how will you know whether the planning reforms are really adequate, whether they're really cutting through? So a specific question about the environmental impact and whether or not the effect on nature is permanent. And secondly, this is an ambitious bill, but is it ambitious enough? How will you judge whether it actually needs to be followed by further planning interventions?
Well, thanks very much for engaging in this issue, because I think this, alongside the trade deals we've done, are probably the most important things that we've done to date on unlocking the growth. I think there's a wide consensus that we need to improve our productivity and growth performance. And yes, I think I did a Today programme interview where I sort of laid into bats and newts and lizards and whatever, I don't know about lizards, great crested newts. I think the Today programme got quite a lot of feedback, but we can't always say no to infrastructure investment. We announced Sizewell C today, and I see that there are quotes from, the Stop Sizewell group. I understand why they have concerns, but if we say no to every new runway and airport, every new housing development, every new onshore or offshore wind farm, every new power station, every data centre, every film studio, we're not going to boost our productivity, we're going to see it decline further. And I am not willing to be the Chancellor that lets Britain go on this path of steady decline, because it would be a path of our own choosing. And so I've chosen investment rather than that path of decline. It does mean having some fights, and it does mean taking on some people who don't want change. And I'm willing to have that argument, because home ownership has gone backwards, our energy bills have gone through the roof, and we don't have the security either of energy supply. So that's why the planning and infrastructure bill, combined with the regulatory reforms, is absolutely essential. Now, you made the point about the government amendments. We've taken two separate sets of legal advice as a government ahead of putting those down. We do not think that it waters down or weakens the bill, but it gives some of the assurances to, frankly, encourage people at your end of this building to get on and do what we need to be done, which is to pass this bill. And if it means that we can shave off a couple of months of this bill, and that would be my urging to all of you, because the quicker we can get this bill on the statute book and into law, the quicker we can actually get on. And one of the things, I know you haven't asked me this question, but if you'd like to ask me what has frustrated me more than anything else in this first year of government, it is how long it takes to get things done. And, you know, of course, we've got to have the proper scrutiny and all the rest of it. That is essential for good lawmaking. But, you know, it's going to be a year and a quarter, a year and a half before we get this flagship legislation, which we've got a mandate to do because it's in our manifesto, to get it through. And I just would urge people in this place to be sympathetic towards this legislation. I know that amendments can often be useful, but every day, week, month that passes is another day, week, month that keeps the costs of infrastructure investment too high and much higher than they are in comparable countries around the world. You know, the reason that HS2 is not coming to my city of Leeds anymore anytime soon is because I'm afraid, as a country, we've cared more about the bats than we have about the commuter times for people in Leeds and West Yorkshire. And we've got to change that, because I care more about a young family getting on the housing ladder than I do about protecting some snails. And I care more about my energy bills and my constituents than I do about the views of people from their windows. And again, we can have a debate about that, but that is where I stand, and that's why we're making these changes.
And how will you know if they're adequate?
If we get stuff built and if it's cheaper to do so.
Do you have any sort of specific criteria for going, this should be that much shorter? Because with all due respect, if you don't, it's very easy to
so this is an MHCLG policy, but absolutely, this is about reducing the time it takes. And you'd already seen, we've got this target, I think, 150 major infrastructure projects in this Parliament. I think we're halfway to achieving that, or something like that. So we've got that target about the number of major infrastructure projects we've signed off. Every week I get a tracker document, Baroness Wolf, that's about this thick, of growth projects that we want to get on with, and every week it is updated of what change is made. And one that I'm looking forward to getting before the summer recess is the plan from Heathrow Airport for a third runway. You know, we need these investments. There's always going to be people that object to that. I don't say that they are wrong from their personal perspective, but as a country, we've got to get on and build this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to find that our children and grandchildren have poorer living standards than we do, and that would be unforgivable.
Could I just add one thing, which is also about the creation of the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, which is now situated within the Treasury, and part of their role is going to be working with departments and others throughout the supply chain, through the delivery chain, to identify where the blockers are and then help us unblock them.
Thank you very much. Baroness Liddell.
Thank you, Chancellor. Can we afford the triple lock on pensions? You know, the OBR have said that it will cost £15.5 billion annually by 2029-30. Now, that's an awful lot of money. And are there any scenarios in which you would envisage modifying the triple lock formula?
Thank you very much, Baroness Liddell. In the manifestos, as you know, we made the commitment to maintain the triple lock, and that it remains our policy, and that's the commitment we gave in our manifesto. We have, though, just launched, as I said in the answer to a previous question, the Pensions Commission to ensure that the state pension remains affordable, and also that people have adequate pensions in retirement. And so Susie Morrissey is doing this regular review of the state pension age for us, because as we live longer, especially if that is healthy life expectancy, we should work a bit longer as well. And then also this review around pension adequacy, because the decline of DB pension schemes and the returns that have not been as high as they should be on DC pensions mean that despite automatic enrolment, people still don't have the pensions that I don't think that they deserve. So we're looking at that long-term sustainability. And you know, despite making some changes a couple of months ago to the winter fuel payment, it is now the case that if you earn more than £35,000 a year, if you have income of more than £35,000 a year, you won't get the winter fuel payment, which saves around £400 million a year. That is the right thing to do, because in a fiscally constrained world, it isn't right that working people on ordinary incomes pay the fuel bills of wealthier pensioners. So we have made that change to make the pension system more affordable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last question, Lord Liddell.
One of the exciting things we talked about a lot in opposition was radical devolution in England. So the question is, Chancellor, are you prepared to devolve any tax powers to regional to mayoral and combined authorities? For example, discussion of a hotel tax, which might raise money for local cultural investment, which is very strong on job creation? And are we prepared to see a serious devolution of budgets as a result of devolution, particularly, in my view, on skills, where people at local level are much more likely to be able to identify what are the real skill shortages in their area?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit, and then I'm going to pass on to Beth Russell. Beth, as well as being second permanent secretary at the Treasury, also heads up the Darlington campus, which has 8 different government departments. A really different way of working for the civil service, where you might sit next to somebody who's not in the same department as you, which I think is a great innovation. And Beth, as I say, has sort of really spearheaded that. At the spending review last month, we announced the rolling out of integrated settlements to 5 new combined authorities from 26-27. That's in addition to what we've already done in Greater Manchester and for the West Midlands combined authority. And also one of the things which I think will be most transformational in the spending review is the £15.6 billion settlement for eight mayoral combined authorities for transport investment, which will see. I've been an MP for 15 years in Leeds West, and it was long before that they were talking about a mass transit scheme, and we're the first government that have actually committed some money to it. In the North East, the tram will go to Sunderland, and in Greater Manchester, the tram will go, I think, to Bury and somewhere else, and in Sheffield I think it's going to be extended to Rotherham. So and beyond mass transit, this is also about better bus services, new bus stations, etc. And in the West Midlands it's going to go to East Birmingham and then on to Solihull. But we've also and again a lot of this work has been led by Beth, a review of the Green Book. which for a long time mayors, MPs from across the country and across party have complained that the Green Book makes it harder to get investment signed off for places outside of London and the South East. And so we've made a significant reforms to that Green Book to make it easier to get that investment to the places that can benefit most from it. But Beth, do you want to say a bit more?
Just a couple of things. So, I mean, you talked about tax powers. On existing tax powers, the devolution white paper is extending some of the existing tax powers that mayors have to all mayors. And as the Chancellor said, I mean, I think one of the things that we are doing very differently in government is working very differently with regional government, particularly actually in the Treasury, but across departments, and local growth plans are playing a really important part in that. So one of the complaints from regional government has been that they're having to have individual conversations bilaterally with individual departments. These growth plans enable us to come together in a single place with them to talk about their priorities and how we can work together to achieve them. So I think that's something that's quite different as well.
No on the other 2 points I made.
One last follow-up from Lord Burns. As a former Perm Sec of the Treasury, I'll be remiss in not allowing him a final question.
And I was very sorry, Chancellor, that I was late arriving. Quite rightly, you put a lot of emphasis on the issue about sticking to fiscal rules. In the past, Chancellors have found, of course, that they've had to make quite a lot of changes to those rules as time has gone on. And over the past year, there has been a suspicion that the headroom that was left for uncertainties was possibly not quite as much as was necessary given the uncertainties that we feel. And I just wondered whether you had any views about how much headroom needs to be built into those figures to make sure that we can actually stick to these rules and don't get derailed by changes that we can't foresee at this moment, which has often happened to Chancellors in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think it is, if the question is, would you like to have more headroom? Yes, of course, we would like to have more headroom.
Build more headroom
But Lord Burns, there is a cost to more headroom. And the cost of headroom is either less spending in a world where there are huge pressures on our public services, or more taxes in an environment where Lord Blackwell and others have already pointed out that taxes are at an historic high. We did increase the headroom. I think it had gone down to £6.5 billion in the budget before last in the previous Parliament. It's now at 10 billion. We kept it at around 10 billion in the spring statement. We've also made a commitment to move to just one major fiscal event a year to give that greater certainty to people around tax levels, and we stuck to that in the spring statement, where we made adjustments without changing tax rates. So, you know, it would be wonderful to be in a world where we had less taxes, better public services, less debt and deficits, and more headroom. But I guess to come back to Lord Wood's first question, in this sort of age of uncertainty in which we live, how are you, how are you conducting your growth policy and your economic strategy? We're trying to build a more stable and resilient economy with fiscal rules that are clearly understood and will be stuck to, and then using as much as possible non-fiscal levers to grow the economy. Of course, fiscal levers including the investment rule to unlock public investment, but also all the things that are necessary to free up that private investment, because we know there is money available to invest, but it's not going to come to Britain unless we do what is needed to get better trade relations, better planning systems, better regulation, better financial sector, including on pensions, and that's what we're trying to achieve as a government. If in time it means we can build in more headroom, even better. But we're dealing with the world and the inheritance we have, not the one perhaps we might like to have had.
Could I just have one point briefly on this question, as I have a close professional interest in it as well, is that I think that the focus on the size of the headroom, I think, underplays what I think could be a more important issue. Is what really matters is the quality and the credibility of the plan that sits underneath the size of that headroom. And you can have more or less credible plans for very different sizes of headroom. And so, for example, in the spring statement, the OBR showed that we were meeting those fiscal rules 2 years early at the 3-year horizon. We're in a position in which the fiscal rules are being met on the basis of legislated tax increases and spending plans that are underpinned by detailed 3-year spending plans at a departmental level. that's a very strong underpinning to the consolidation path, and I think is at least as important as the size of headroom, given the range of uncertainty that you mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, you urged us earlier on to proceed in a timely manner on the planning bill, and we can assure you we've proceeded in a timely manner today because we've hit 3:30 exactly on the mark. Thank you to you and your team for coming today. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure you'll be setting an example, working hard and raising productivity over the summer, but we wish you at least some time when you're letting your productivity slip at some point over the next couple of months. Thank you very much for your time, and with that, I end the public meeting.